I am ready.
Okay, let's do it. Good evening. It is 7 o'clock and the select board meeting is begun. The first thing on our agenda is the minutes. We have two sets of minutes, November 13th and November 7th. So taking November 7th first, is there a motion?
I'd move to approve the minutes of November 7th, subject to any corrections.
Is there a second?
Second.
Through. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3.
Sorry, I had myself muted. For page 2, it mentions for the number 7 for the Glaser specific plan, that they were gonna, over 15 acres would be deeded to the town, and I actually think that should be 50 acres.
Okay. Is there discussion on that, or is that okay with people?
You're counting the true parcels, I believe, is that right, Greta?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yep.
Okay. Page 3. Subject to the modification recommended on the Glaser parcel section. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Are approved. The next is November 13th. Is there a motion?
I'd move approval of the minutes of November 13th, subject to any corrections.
Is there a second?
Second.
Page 1. Hearing nothing and having only one page. All those in favor of approving the minutes say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Okay. Next is public comment. This would be a moment for anybody in attendance or anybody attending online to make any comment that they wish. It can be about what is on the schedule, but you may want to wait until we cover that issue, but you don't have to. Is there anybody here? Okay. Eric, is there anybody online? Nope. Next on the agenda, errors and omissions to the 2023 grand list. Bill, come on down.
I had to think of something funny to say, but I got up here and I was like, where's Jeff? Annually, the assessor's office and lister's office continues to correct anything that may have been fallen through the cracks with respect to the grant list for 2023. We have until December 31 of 2023 to make those changes, but they have to be approved by the select board. This year we have just one that involves any monetary value, and this I think the best way to explain it was Dick's explanation. We were trying to get the grand list to the town clerk because we have such an early tax bill go out, and these people had come in May to ask for tax exempt status, had done the forms that they're required to do, and then we did not present to the listers in time to put it on the grant list for an error and omission to give them tax exempt status. The listers met last month and approved tax status for the parcel 03102-080000, the Vietnamese American Buddhist Association of Massachusetts. All others, if you have questions, they're just name changes, property transfer corrections, nothing really too complex.
Further questions for Bill?
Actually, this, I hope it's just a typo, but the third one down, 159000, correcting Holmberg and spelled Joseph wrong.
Yep. So it should be Holmberg, not Holmber.
And is Joseph Joesph?
Yep.
Really?
Yep.
Interesting.
I'll double check on that, but I believe that's correct. Yep.
Well, technically, we're only changing Holmberg, so, right?
Any other questions for Bill? Hearing none, a proposed motion is recommended.
Move to approve the corrections to the 2023 grand list as proposed by the listers.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it.
Great.
Bill, you're
Eric-
up again.
Yep, Eric asked me to speak to you all a little bit on what's going on in Lister's office. We haven't had a chance to speak live for quite some time. First thing I would like to approach is, and I don't know if any of you have read too much on it, but the House and Senate passed H 480 this past spring, and that is going to entail major changes to how grand lists are filed, how reappraisals are completed, how funding is provided to towns, along with many other potential changes that might be coming down the pike. The Director of Property Evaluation and Review, Jill Remick, is required to submit a report to the House on December 15th of 2023, outlining how they plan on streamlining reappraisals so that towns will no longer be doing the reappraisals. They will be done statewide and funded statewide. And what that'll also mean is a reduction in the per parcel monies that we get from the state annually, and that'll go from $9 to $2. What's not clear is areas such as budget funding. We currently have a very large sum of money in the bank that is put in there year to year to cover a reappraisal. The state legislature hasn't said anything about it. I don't believe that they can ask for it back. Simply because a lot of towns build that into their municipal budgets year to year, and when they have to reappraise, they bond. So to make Williston, just because we've been properly budgeting for the future, pay back monies that we have in the bank, I don't think will happen. But again, just a warning. So the other part of the H480 has to do with education, to try and make sure that listers and assessors are qualified to be doing the job, because it's become much more complex than it was in the past. And then there were a lot of other things to homestead classifications, how we determine commercial properties. And I think that the long and the short of what's going to come out of 480 is there's going to be a lot of it that is going to be included in it, but there's going to be a lot of it that's going to be repealed. So they just made a big, huge, broad circle to encompass everything they could think of. And now they're asking Jill to give them a report, and they're going to go back and restudy it. The other big point of contention that is affecting so many towns in the state of Vermont is the common level assessment. We all know what real estate prices have done since COVID hit, and it's still going on. We see numbers that we just shake our heads at on a daily basis. But instead of the towns requiring to do a reappraisal based upon a common level of assessment, which is a measurement of taking sale prices divided by assessments to come up with a percentage of assessment versus sale price, that number used to be 85%. And this year, if the legislature hadn't done anything about it, we would have had 220 towns that would have been on reappraisal requirement lists out of 250, and next year that number would have been 240, or would be 240. So the legislature got rid of the CLA, and they're relying on what I've been proposing or advocating for many years, and that's the coefficient of dispersion. That measures equity within our community. It tells us how close everybody is to that center line, whether it be 100%, 80%, or even 60%. We want to make sure everybody's as close to that percentage mark as we can, so that when somebody's paying their taxes, they can be assured that they're not paying unfairly based upon an inequitable assessment compared to their neighbors. And that's what the legislature chose to pass, and that number is 20. Right now, the town of Williston COD is roughly 12.5, so we're in really good shape. So I don't think I think the state is going to be dictating us when we reappraise, and they'll probably be doing the reappraisal, because we're probably going to be 5 or 6 years out, considering a lot of small towns are in a lot worse shape. Because right now there's roughly 110 towns that have a COD that's above 20%. So those are the first towns that are going to be kind of looked at and try to bring them on track. And then the more larger suburban homogeneous communities, such as what we have in Chittenden County, are probably going to be latter than earlier, simply because we're equitably assessing, because we have much better databases to work from. So any questions on that before I get into my last little spiel?
So coefficient of dispersion measures town to town? Because that was the point of CLA, was town to town.
The coefficient of dispersion and the CLA are town to town.
Oh, okay.
Yep, there's actually 3 different ones. And I won't get too deep into the weeds, but there's also a thing called the price-related differential, or the PRD. And that measures equity within upper-priced properties, medium-priced properties, and low-priced properties. So you can have a COD that's pretty good, but you can have a lot of inequities within the lower-priced population or priced homes and the higher-priced homes. And that's the PRD measurement. PRDs generally want to be 1.02 to 0.98. Anything above that will show that you're kind of being discriminatory on one side of the coin or the other. Yeah, but the COD is a really, really important one. That gives us our best glance at what we're doing in town as far as equitably assessing properties. Now, all right, last thing. I've been here 23 years. I'm not going anywhere, so I don't plan on it, at least at this point. But this coming fiscal year, my grand list probably is not going to increase. It's the first time in 23 years I've been here that it has not. We typically see anywhere from 15 to 25 million an increase in our grand list. We have 2 factors that are working against us. Number one, the slowdown in the construction industry. But more importantly, Vermont Gas Systems got a new comptroller this year. They filed their gas inventory, equipment inventory incorrectly, and we had an increase of 31 million to 41 million, which was a $10 million increase. After I had filed the grand list and after you all set the tax rate, we get a phone call from Vermont Gas that says, oops, we made a boo-boo. That 41 million does not include the adjustment to the common level of assessment, which utilities do, Green Mountain Power, all, Valco, they all do. And that involves $10 million. So unless Vermont Gas puts in a lot of infrastructure this year, we're looking at $10 million hit out of the gate. The other one is we had a BCA hearing here earlier this year, and one of the appellants was Maple Tree Place. And in that hearing, I testified to the board that I didn't want the board to put the cart before the horse. They were complaining and concerned about the vacancy of Christmas Tree Place and not being able to replace it. And I said, that's kind of putting the cart before the horse, because we don't know who's in line to potentially come in there. And if you adjust based upon that vacancy, which is a big store, it's 40,000 square feet. Actually, it might be 60, but any event's big. If we don't know what's going to go on in 6 months, 9 months from now, when we get a better picture of what's happening there, then I testified I will adjust for it. So if you come here again and grievance it, and that thing is vacant, I'm gonna have to take it up, and it could potentially be about a $5 million hit. So if we were to get $15 million in increases next year, that's 15 we're gonna lose, unfortunately. But good news is it's never happened before, which is surprising considering we've been through pretty significant recessions. Yeah.
It's the other, Bed Bath and Beyond and the toy store. We've had big retailers go out before when they
Yeah.
adjusted then.
This is the biggest. Yeah, I mean, Circuit City, those guys are about 20,000. Christmas Tree Place that was a driver. That created a lot of traffic in Maple Tree Place. Now, from my observation, I don't know what their gross sales were, number of vehicle visits was, but from what I observed, it's a pretty popular place. Yeah, so. Yeah, but maybe we'll end up with a retailer from Burlington. Who knows? We just don't know. We don't have that crystal ball, but by June we will know.
And it's kind of a tricky position for you to be in if you're going to be starting to assess based on whether or not you think a retailer is going to be able to replace a tenant, right? So
Maple Tree Place is kind of its own little animal, right? So generally speaking, the state of Vermont recognizes valuation by assessment purposes in what's called fee simple, which is, total ownership. But Maple Tree Place and a lot of these other very large malls are valuated based upon leased fee, which means a buyer of that property, when Maple Tree bought that property back in 16, 17, was it? It was reappraisal year. When they bought that, they paid like $7, $8, $9 million more for the property because they had long-term leases in place. And so they were confident that their leases would stay in place, and therefore they're paying more than they would have paid had it been a black store mall, which means it had been vacant. And so that comes into play. There's questions nationally whether or not these fees should be the recognized methodology for these type of establishments, and should we be looking at them from what's called the dark store theory, meaning as if they were vacant. And there's a couple state Supreme Courts that's ruled on it. Pennsylvania, I believe, is one. But there's never been anything that's been brought to the state on this. So we go with the least fee. It seems to work. Everybody seems to be happy, and we haven't, again, had any legislation or any Superior Court or Supreme Court decisions that would have to overturn that and start looking at it under fee. Yeah.
Right, now, you mentioned a potential $15 million hit, total hit. What percentage of that, of the total grand list is that?
That's about, I believe it would be about 0.75%. So our total ground list is a little bit over 2 billion. Yeah, so I think it would be a little over 0.75.
Thank you.
Other questions for Bill?
You had to pick my first budget year to do this to me.
Sorry. Trust me, it's not what I like either. I love coming in and saying to Eric, I'm going to get a 1% for you, and I come in with 1.5 or 1.75. I'd rather do that. That makes me look a lot better than the alternative.
Yeah, I always ask Bill, what's your conservative prediction? And then as I'm drafting the revenue side of the budget, which surely we'll use that growth prediction to try to figure out what a cent's going to raise next year. So when Bill told me this year, keep it flat. So that's where maybe we'll get a surprise in the spring.
Hopefully,
here,
yeah.
so.
And the one you never know about is the utilities. Because you don't know what Vermont Gas or Velco, Vermont Transco, or Green Mountain Power is doing. They might replace a large substation that we don't know about, and all of a sudden we get an inventory from them, and it's 20 million more than it was the year before. And we cannot count on that because we do not know what's going on. They're not getting permits for that kind of thing. Yeah, so we just can't count on it.
Keep us posted.
All right.
My allowance at home is $20 a week, so I'm happy.
Yep. Great. Thank you all. Appreciate it. It's nice to see you in person.
Welcome.
Yep.
All right, Bill.
So we're actually going to go back to an agenda item, public comment. Ma'am, I understand you wanted to make a public comment. Is that?
Yes.
Please come on up.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ramona Guadalupe. I'm a minister. I've been living in Vermont for 33 years, and I'm a Willistonite for almost 30 years. I have a concern about the budget, and I'm going to refer to our first responders in our police department that I have a great concern. I come from a family of police officers, and my concern is I have seen great change since I've moved here almost 30 years ago here to Vermont, to Williston. Williston have changed immensely, as some of you already know that. My concern is the budget of the police officers and the first responders, the firefighters. Is getting to the point that about every hour, I hear our first responders pulling out of their bay. Then I see our local Williston Police Department babysitting our local businesses. They're out there constantly. The police department are short in staff. I don't know what's going on, but I believe it has to do with the budget and not having enough staff to oversee the public well-being of Williston. I was talking to one of your selected board members last week, and I was invited because I was concerned that you have in this budget for 2024, am I correct? And I believe that after the pandemic, a lot of new businesses have moved into our area, let alone Vermont has increased in population. New stores, new residents, the traffic of foot traffic have increased. I'm not talking about the foot traffic going to the store, but the foot traffic out there. And our police officers, coming from a family of law enforcement, that's a lot of work for them. Minding all these businesses, new businesses that they moved to Williston because they found it safe. They came from other areas, they moved here to Williston. Banks, hotels, restaurants, because they felt safe. The crime in Williston is increasing. When a criminal decides and observes our law enforcement and the structure of the government that we have here in Williston, most people leave their car doors open. They brag about it. Oh, I leave my car door open here in Williston or Vermont. That invites crime. Second, a lot of the women shopping in our local supermarket, they leave their purse open in their cart. I have to tell them, please, you're inviting crime, please close your purse. Because I have these awareness, and it's a big concern, the tapestry of Williston have changed since I moved here almost 30 years ago. I came up here as a minister and for work. This is where I was called to in Vermont. I come from upstate New York, but I'm a native from Brooklynite, just like Bernie Sanders. So I'm aware of the changes. And I believe that these new businesses that have moved in our area because they felt safe, I think they should contribute to the budget. I'm not a CPA. I do not know how these things work, but I'm pretty sure that we have attorneys that will help the town figure that out. How could we implement these new businesses that have moved to our town? Because our police force, now they have to patrol those stores in that area. So that is a great concern. We have new residents, more apartments are being built in our area. More people, just like I would say in my church, more people, more problem. But it's the truth. Criminals, they observe. They see how weak and the weak link in each town. We see what has happened to other towns nearby, that the residents don't feel safe. Even when they go out for dinner, if they have to work late, they don't feel safe. I don't want to mention the town, but I'm pretty sure you know what town that is. And I believe that these businesses should partake in the budget. I don't know how that works, but I am putting this out there to you. Our police department needs help. Increase in salary, it will help to entice newcomer with the Academy Police Department here in the state of Vermont. We only have one. And even to bring in more diversity, because again, Williston have changed and it's continued to change. And when I say diversity, someone que habla español, que pueda ayudar, in other words, I speak Spanish, I'm bilingual, that is able to help the public if any situation do arise. Our first responders, the firefighters, they're a great team of firefighters that I have met that have even helped me out. But I believe that each hour that they go out, that's wear and tear on the fire equipment, that brings stress to them. The same thing with the law enforcement too. Short in staff, patrolling the area now that it's getting bigger. I believe that these businesses, including hotels, banks, and other newcomers should participate in this budget and increase for firefighters and police officers. This is why I'm here. It is a great concern, not only for me, but for the resident Willistonites.
Thank you.
Thank you for hearing me.
Yeah, thank you. You made, good points. We agree, we agree with you.
Well, I know we don't just get back into conversations, but businesses do contribute in our town.
I'm aware of
I mean, because tax-wise, I can't explain the 1% tax very well, but all sales, we get 1% of everything that's sold in town. There's also, I think, a rooms and meals, so we get something from the hotels. And of course, when it puts up a building, it increases our grand list, and we send them a bill for property tax like anybody else. So they do. I'm looking forward to getting more into the budget so I can understand sort of the balance, like how much they're contributing versus how much our services are going to support them. But but there is a mechanism for all of this growth to contribute to the town supports that they need. It'll be interesting for me I'm looking forward to figuring out if that's in balance or not.
I'm a homeowner. I definitely not advocating for homeowners' taxes to be, tower taxes, but I strongly believe that because they are enjoying the peaceful and tranquility, this is why they moved here, a lot of these businesses.
Mhm.
I believe that they should contribute extra.
Yeah.
So that is my proposal to the selected board, and I leave it into your hands now. I do not want to take a petition and get 400 signatures. They could be in the ballot. I don't want to go through that. So this is why I'm bringing this up to you. Thank you so much again.
Thank you for your thoughts.
Yeah.
So next on the schedule is the Town Human Resources Audit Report presentation, and we're going to be hearing from Katrina, is that?
Yep, Katrina from Hickok and Boardman HR Intelligence. I'm getting her connected right now. Just to tee this up for the board, I engaged Hickok and Boardman this fall to take a look at our human resources task processes. A good way to do this is kind of auditing our operation, looking at what tasks need to be complete, who's doing them, how the work efficiency and the workflow is going. We share these tasks among 4 different staff members right now. We find this is a good process for an organization to go through. It kind of takes a look under the hood and assess kind of where you are and where you could look to improve your processes and your capacity. So Katrina's going to, I provided the report to the board on Friday. Katrina's going to give a general overview and really open up for questions that the board has and from their findings and recommendations here. So I think I'll turn it over to Katrina.
Perfect, thank you. Nice to see you, Eric. Nice to virtually meet all of you. As Eric mentioned, I'm Katrina Meggs, and I work with Hickok and Boardman HR Intelligence. And so I'm going to, Eric, it says host disabled for participant screening. Is that something you can give me permission to do?
Oh, sure. I think I know how to do that. Okay, try it now. I think it should work.
Perfect. Okay. So, I have a little presentation. I want to be really respectful to your time and as we go through this, but as if I can get there we go. I want to talk a little bit about the background. Eric touched briefly, on the purpose of pulling us in to conduct this audit, but I want to give just a little bit of what we were looking for, what we found, what our recommendations are, but then I would love to give time at the end for more of a conversation. If there are specific questions or if there's something that I mentioned during the presentation. That said, I'm open to questions as I'm presenting, so please, I've got 2 screens going, so if you've got a question and I don't see you, please feel free to speak it up. So as Eric mentioned, we were able to meet with the town to look at HR processes, practices, sort of through a lens of, are there places where we can make recommendations for improvement? The main focus was around compliance, particularly with state and federal regulations. That tends to be sort of a big hidden component that HR tends to be responsible for. Also, as Eric mentioned, we worked with not only Eric, but the finance director, the HR coordinator, assistant to the town manager, and some of the other finance employees to be able to get to this information. We looked at it through two lenses. One was around strategic HR, and one was around compliance. So when I talk about strategic HR, I'm talking about the employee life cycle, right? We sort of talk from advertising and recruiting all the way through to termination or retirement and everything that falls in between. And we, met with all the parties that I had mentioned before to sort of glean who does what, where do these responsibilities lie? Is it a fluid process? Does one person have an understanding of the whole process, start to finish? We looked at gaps, areas of weakness, and then sort of tried to determine, are there places where we can make recommendations? And we'll get into some of those as we go forward. I do want to mention that we do have recommendations, but there was nothing in the audit that we found that we felt needed immediate action, that it was, bridging on the line of non-compliance or something along those lines. So our recommendations are really from that HR lens of this would serve the town best when we get to those recommendations. The other lens that we looked at this through was HR compliance, and that is one of the big hot spots, in my opinion, when we talk about human resources and all of the pieces that fall. So we looked at the handbook, we looked at policies, we looked at procedures, practices around that. And then, you'll hear some more of our recommendations when it comes to templates, policies, improvement, when it comes into that compliance lens. So when we jump into recruiting, we went through the whole life cycle, and we have a couple of recommendations that I think will help not only give a better applicant experience, but it will make the process for onboarding new employees a lot easier. So we're encouraging the town to look at a centralized employment process, a standard application that all applicants fill out, and the use of templates for offer letters so that there's some consistency across all departments. And so what happens is when HR functions are sort of spidered out and departments hold different responsibilities, or each department does their own, there isn't consistency. So the application experience for somebody, say, in the public works department is going to be very different than the application process for somebody maybe within the finance department or just within the office. And so from an HR perspective, we really want to see consistency across that entire process. We're also recommending that there's training for people who serve on an interview committee, and that there is some consistency in the questions that are asked. This is happening in pockets, but again, not sort of across the entire town as a unit. And so we'd really like to see that anybody who serves on an interview committee has almost a handbook that says, here are the questions we can ask, here are the questions we can't ask. These are some things we want to look at. Trying to draw, excuse me, attention to, any of our unconscious bias. Are we allowing every applicant the same opportunity to make it through the process? And we'll touch on that inclusivity a little further along in the presentation. And then to establish a background check process to ensure that all employees working with minors have that background check. And again, it's happening in pieces. It's just not a consistent process across the town. So when we look at that, employee life cycle, we sort of look at the new hire. What happens as they go from applicant to that new hire? And so we're recommending that the town create a centralized file system for all the employee files, and to make sure that they're contained in one location, that one person is responsible for all of the employee files. And I know that there has been some work to make these electronic, which is absolutely fantastic, to be able to eliminate paper and have access really quickly to those pieces. But to be able to get that to a centralized system is going to make everything so much more efficient from a human resources standpoint. We're also encouraging the town to centralize some onboarding procedures to make sure that all employees sort of have that same experience, right? I think what's happening right now, because each department is responsible for the onboarding, is that different departments may do it differently. And so depending what department you come into as a new hire, your experience is going to be a little different. So we're have talked with the town on how do we get this, into a package that everybody experiences something similar. It may not be identical, but that there's some similar feeling that you understand what the culture is within the town, and sort of what are some of those rules and regulations and those pieces that everybody gets to experience. And then again, just encouraging review of the handbook for updates to best practice, some of those legal compliance pieces, as well as the organizational culture. I think we all know after the last 3 years, the world has changed very quickly and things have happened. And so it requires a lot of due diligence in making sure that what you put in your handbook is current and is up to date. So we encourage that review. With benefits, Hickory Boardman actually is your broker, so that was a little easier for us to sort of delve into. But we are encouraging that you explore with your broker the use of a third-party administrator for COBRA. And for those of you who don't know what COBRA is, COBRA, and I'm gonna botch what the acronym is for, but basically it's the insurance that's extended after an employee leaves the employment relationship with you. And so basically it's an extension of the insurance that you're currently offering that person for up to 18 months. It changed a little bit during COVID, and so you had to extend it longer. And it's those sort of pieces that this TPA would administer, make sure that the timeliness of the documentation gets to the person who's left the employment relationship. It's a really low cost piece, and a TPA is able to do it, make sure that everything is compliant with it. And so for the cost and how infrequent people use COBRA, we really think that it's a great efficiency benefit for the town to explore. So when we talk about compensation, we didn't look at the town's specific compensation, but we looked at policies and procedures around it. And one of the biggest pieces that we always look at when we look at compensation from a compliance standpoint is, are you adhering to the Fair Labor Standard Act? And that falls into sort of the designation of exempt and non-exempt employees, as well as the identification of independent contractors. So we just are encouraging a scheduled review, an annual, biannual review of job description. I think, right now it's happening as a position gets posted and a job description gets updated, but just to make sure that that doesn't fall below the radar. One of the other pieces that we always make sure that our clients are aware of is the Vermont law when you have to pay an employee when they have an involuntary termination. And then our final recommendation when it comes to compensation is to explore the possibility of a compensation philosophy that helps complement your pay ranges and describes mechanisms for pay ranges and timeframes for your non-represented employees. I know it's very clear in the collective bargaining unit agreements what happens for those folks, but for the folks that fall out of it, this may be a benefit. So when we look at performance evaluations, we're just encouraging the town to establish a process that outlines when and how employees are going to get their performance evaluation feedback, whether it's informal or formal, so that employees have an idea of how compensation is looked at, when their performance is looked at. And I know that within the collective bargaining unit agreements, that's spelled out a little bit more, but we encourage the town to explore the sort of opportunities around the performance evaluation. Along those same lines, to provide training to your supervisors and your managers on how to conduct those performance evaluations. It's always, everybody, every year, really benefits from that type of training. And then, to connect those goals with the department, individual goals, department goals, the overall town strategic plan, and help develop metrics so that the employees really can see how they're contributing to the overall success of the town. There's a lot of research that shows that we as humans have a desire to have a connection to something larger than ourselves when it comes to work. And so that metric and those goals are really great ways to be able to connect and engage that employee. And then along the lines of training and development, specifically establish an annual, harassment and discrimination prevention training that you require for all employees. This isn't a law, but it certainly is best practice to do on an annual basis. I also think that there are some ways to establish some training and development programs around professional development for some of the employees. And that's going to, again, allow for engagement with those employees, that connection to work, what they're doing, how they're doing. You might be able to tap into some of their passions and look down the line to see if they're interested in different positions, succession planning. All of those pieces can come out of those pieces of professional development. And then we're at the end of the sort of employee life cycle. And, we want to make sure that Eric or, whoever is on the HR team is involved or consulted when there is a progressive discipline or a termination. And I think the more we talk about centralizing all of these processes, the more moot that point will be. But I think it's really important that they're involved in the process and not just sort of finding out at the tail end that something has happened, particularly from an HR standpoint. Exit checklists are great. I think anytime we can have a checklist that helps us onboard, off-board employees, it gives whoever is doing it that sort of list, and they know exactly what they need to do and when they need to do it. And then exit interviews can provide really valuable information to an organization when an employee is leaving. Obviously, we don't do them when it's an involuntary term, but if people are leaving, there are sometimes places where we can glean information that we can then take back and look at specifics. If there was a reason that somebody left other than, their spouse was relocated, that's one thing. We can't affect that. But, if there's some underlying cultural thing or misunderstanding, sometimes it gives us the ability to dive a little deeper and understand that. So these are all the general, recommendations that we have. Before I go to that next slide, I want to ask if there are any questions. And I'm going to lean on you, Eric, to see, because I can only see you and one other person.
Questions right now from anyone? Apparently not.
Nope.
Nope. Keep going,
Okay.
Katrina.
Perfect. So, as we move to our overall recommendations, I think it's really in Williston's best interest to consider adding a dedicated HR professional. And I think that person should be at a director level to be able to help administer a lot of these policies and practices. Right now, as Eric mentioned, there were several people that we had to interview because HR is really sort of spidered out and there's a lot of different people touching it and holding various responsibilities. While it's working, I'm not here to tell you it's not working. It's putting stress on all of those people and pulling resources away from finance functions or support to the town manager from the assistant town manager. So it's sort of pulling those pieces away. I think our recommendation really aligns with the increasing trend that we're seeing with organizations, grabbing hold of the benefits of having an HR professional within their organization. And I think one of the biggest places that we're seeing it is within the recruiting and the retention, right? I think you could probably ask anyone in any department, what's your biggest struggle? And it's going to come to, recruiting people, finding people, hiring people, going through that process. And so I think when we look at that, that's where that dedicated HR person can help achieve some of those recommendations that we said. They can help streamline and centralize that process and take that task that everybody is doing in various departments and own it in one place, as opposed to, each department head being responsible for a portion of that recruitment. I think your town is of a really big size right now, and not a big size, but it's big enough that when we look at statistics for who has an HR professional within their organization, we typically see anything over 50 with starting to look at a dedicated HR professional. And certainly when you hit the 100 mark, you're looking at one or more HR professionals. So I think that you definitely are brushing up against that. And I also like to say, when we work with municipalities, the complexity of the work that you do isn't just like it would be if you were working in one manufacturing plant where your goal was, you've got your public works, you've got your safety departments, you've got your parks and rec that are all functioning and doing very different things. And so that HR person or the person responsible for that recruiting needs to know each of those components. The other piece that I had done a little bit of research on is just the growth that Williston has gone through over the last 20 years. We're looking at 16%, in the last 10 years, 14 in the 10 before that. The trajectory certainly is pointing that there's going to be more growth. And I did happen to see just recently, I think it was a BT Digger article, that you had another audit or some research done, and there was a recommendation that you increase, your police staff. Well, that's going to put a burden on somebody to have to go through and recruit and find and hire all those people. Again, supporting that, having a dedicated person who can help, assist with not only the practical pieces of it, but the policy around it and how it's laid out. I think that, we're really seeing a big focus on recruitment and retention. And so that was sort of that focus there, but there certainly are other benefits that a dedicated HR professional can look for. And again, we're looking at this through what are the policies, what are the procedures, what are the practices that the town can put into place, but why, right? We really want to make sure that your recruitment process is fair and transparent, right? I think the town, you have just started talking about some DEI work, and you want to make sure that everything that you're doing is through that lens. And this HR professional is able to provide that lens for you. Everything that they do is looking at it through that lens, when your finance person is looking at it through the finance lens, and so on and so on. So I think that when you are able to sort of streamline that practice, make sure it's fair, make sure it's equitable, you're really able to show applicants the town cares. We really are committed to inclusivity and respect for every candidate. And I think sometimes when pieces are handled in different places, the experience may not be the same for everyone. We talked a little bit about performance reviews. If this is something that the town wants to think about, and with merit-based compensation, this is again a function that your HR professional could handle. I think it plays a huge role in engagement. So again, we go back to that recruitment and retention. Engagement is why people stay, right? That's what keeps people at an organization, is they feel the connection, they feel like they're being valued, they feel like they're being heard. And so you really want to make sure that you marry all that together, that you're not just able to recruit people, but then once you have them, you're able to retain them. I mentioned a few minutes ago the DEI. I think that this position would be able to champion your DEI initiatives and could, be the resource for your leadership. It's a change, right? Adopting a DEI policy and a practice and changing your culture doesn't happen overnight. It requires really intentional work and focus to be able to change that culture. And I think given what everybody is doing, you would be able to have a dedicated person to sort of help champion that along. So, again, you're doing a good job. The folks that are handling all the HR pieces are doing a good job, but at what cost? What aren't they able to do because they're having to place ads or onboard new people or do paperwork, or those are the pieces that I encourage you to think about. That yeah, things are okay now, but if you bring on another 10 people or another 15 employees, what's that going to do, and how much time is it going to take for the existing people, to make sure that that is happening? So questions. I just downloaded a lot of information to all of you in a lot of HR language, so I'm happy to take any questions, comments, feedback.
Anybody? A lot.
Have to be Jeff, I have to ask a question.
Sure. Need one.
Thank you for this. Is it Katrina?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Katrina. So I do see, I liked how you divided the concepts into sort of compliance and making sure we're doing everything the way it has to be done and done correctly. I appreciate that. I'm sure that that's something our staff is good at. It's except for something like Cobra, which is a one-off and difficult. I could see, I'm sure we're not double paying somebody or giving, the wrong contract. I'm sure some of that stuff is right. I can also see that I think what you call strategic HR, like making sure that everybody has the same onboarding experience or is getting the same training on a regular basis. All that can be in the best interest. We're definitely going to do it this year, and then something else happens and it doesn't happen. So I appreciate sort of the centralizing of the compliance and then having the capacity for a professional to move the town forward on these other things. So that was sort of my reaction to that. I guess my question is, I'm a little interested in what you say about recruiting. Do you see in towns, in HR directors in towns, are they really involved in recruiting, or are they just placing the ads and stuff? Because it seems like, to your point, that there's a lot of different things going on in a town. Like, I'm sure the police staff were probably better recruiters than an HR director might be. So I'm just wondering, I just don't have experience in that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a fantastic question. I apologize, I can't see your name. But I think it's a great question, because absolutely, this person is not going to be able to do everything. And we'll use the police as an example. They definitely know, the places where to place ads. They are in that network, right? They're able to say, hey, we have an opening. Can we, does anybody have anything? I think the piece that your HR professional can bring is that consistency around the process. They also can help with the influx of applications, right? So that you don't have a police officer or a police chief that's filtering through applicants to say, oh, this person's qualified, this one isn't, certainly helping with scheduling and being able to do that. The one piece that I didn't mention was that I think that the more you can rely on technology to be able to help do those transactional pieces and allow people to do the people pieces. And where I'm going with that was I was thinking about scheduling, interviews, that they're able to help schedule the interviews and make sure that the committee is all together and the committee has the questions that they're going to ask. So I think that it can offer some support in those ways. But, depending what the recruitment looks like, there's a possibility that they're not going to be involved in every single interview or that piece. But the support that they can offer and the ability to help maybe streamline some things so that you don't have the police chief doing, all the background work for scheduling an interview. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. Yeah, that sort of aligns more with my experience in the schools. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Just one thing I'd add briefly, it's, staff does a great job around this, and it's, for years since I've been here with the town, it's been a lot of pieces in to make the HR function work, and we're continuing to get more complex and add more staff here. And one thing I think about they address well in the report is this concept of the continued employee development, helping, coach our department heads, but also our staff with ongoing training and development to help them. We want to keep people around here, and having just some systems focus on that, I think is a real value added, potentially to more capacity building in town here. Just try to keep up with the compliance and everything day to day. Then you want that value added to grow your workforce and develop your workforce. So I can see, building capacity for that is something for us to think about moving ahead.
I think if it's done correctly too, it might give employees another ear if they just need to talk to somebody and they don't want to go to the town manager to have a conversation or they.
Absolutely. And I think that that's, that's one of those pieces that's important when we talk about culture. If there is that, he's the town manager. Some people may have a little angst with going to the town manager if they have an issue, but it definitely allows organizations to have another layer, where you might be able to be aware of something before it becomes an issue.
Yeah, and I just share, Shirley's title as Director of Finance and HR, it's a big title to hold. Historically, the finance department in town has covered that, but certainly Shirley can attest to the needs for the town's finances and trying to balance all these things that are on her plate as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would a director of HR be involved in collective bargaining processes? Or would that, outside of the role? I might have missed it, I'm sorry.
No. That's a great question. And I'm going to defer to Eric in the specifics of it, but we certainly see people within municipalities, within supervisory unions, in HR roles that are part of that collective bargaining piece. Again, it gives you one more person at the table who's going through the process with maybe a different lens or a little bit of a different take on what's happening. They're the person that knows your benefits. They're the ones that understand your PTO. And so when you start getting into negotiations around those pieces, you've got that other party at the table. If that's, Eric and I have not had a conversation of what he would think that this position would be involved, but we certainly see it in other towns and in other places that they're very involved in sort of the negotiation piece.
Yep, that would be my intent, for be heavily involved in collective bargaining and also be that point person for questions on the contract on a day-to-day basis. Those can be quite common for contract interpretations, so. That's part of the work.
To that as well. Katrina, yeah.
I couldn't hear, was that?
Hi, Katrina, Shirley, how are you? Yeah, just listening. To me personally, that is a really valid concern that Greta brought up because if the HR person isn't sitting at that collective bargaining table, you need someone to understand what your systems can do before you agree to something in the contract. So it's vital that the HR person is in that.
Absolutely,
Discussion.
absolutely.
Anything else? There is no formal action taken tonight. This is for our much-needed education. So, Katrina, thank you very much, if she's still there.
Yep.
I'm still here.
Okay, all right, well, thank you for your presentation. I'm sure we're definitely going to be coming back to this issue, and we'll probably have follow-up questions or something.
Absolutely. If there's anything else that, that we can do, if there are other questions, please feel free to, even after this. Eric has my contact information, happy to address any questions, other thoughts, explorations, and other ways.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Well,
Thanks,
thank you.
Katrina.
Have a happy holiday, everyone.
You
Thank
too.
You too.
Okay, so next, Glaser parcel specific plan transmittal overview, part 2. So,
Yeah, so this is part 1 was on the 7th a couple weeks ago. So Emily Heyman, our senior planner, is back tonight to go through more aspects of this transmittal from the Planning Commission for the specific plan on the Glaser parcel. A opportunity for the board to ask any questions from part 1 that you still have. The action item for the board, you could consider it tonight, is consider to warn a public hearing on this. Warning a public hearing is not an approval; it's a next step in the process. So the board has that option should it want to consider any action tonight, depending where your discussion leads. Well, I'll turn it over to Emily.
Cool. Thank you, Eric. So on the 7th, I gave an overview of what the specific plan process is, what those proposed town plan and bylaw amendments say that you would be holding a public hearing on if you choose to move forward, as well as an overview of the proposed substantial benefit. Based on your questions from last week, my proposal for tonight is to go over some of the unofficial transmittal components. So you might have a hearing on town plan bylaw amendments, but there's a lot of other nuance and things to understand about this project, like the future land use pattern in this part of town, growth management utilization, as well as conventional subdivision versus this process. As a reminder, this is a proposal for a 109-unit residential subdivision that would offer a substantial benefit to the town of open space land donation to the town. So the future development pattern in the residential zoning district, or RZD, that suburban pattern is coming to an end. It began in the 1960s with a lot of neighborhoods up off Route 2A. It reached its peak in the 1990s and early 2000s with Southridge and Brennan Woods. The map included in your packet shows parcels in the residential zoning district primarily, but part of that growth allocation area in yellow. The parcels in red are larger than 5 acres and theoretically have development potential. This does include the Glaser property as well as Catamount Golf, where Summerfield subdivision is proposed, and the Martell property. Trinity Baptist Church as well. However, they had an application going through the DRB, they withdrew. And some of these other properties that are highlighted in maroon have an existing land use. The very north end of Route 2A is Velcro Transmission. There's also the Williston Golf Club, some church properties. And a lot of these parcels have wetlands or watershed buffer constraints that would make maximum residential build out or even any development very challenging.
Could you just tell me when you say they have land use, maybe they have restrictions because of the land use, or they just happen to be in an orchard or a golf course right now?
Yeah, what it happens to be right now. Yep. Growth management utilization. So this was what I called last week as proof of the poof. Chapter 11 sets that growth target of 80 dwelling unit equivalents per year. And this is a 10-year rolling cycle where every year the previous year falls off, a new one is added. There's always a 10-year horizon. And allocation goes poof for 2 reasons. It goes unutilized and falls off that 10-year cycle, or a project is abandoned before construction begins, like Trinity Baptist Church. I can't quote you exactly, maybe they got 20 or 30 units allocation and they went poof. During the advisory committee process, I analyzed the growth management system across fiscal years 2016 to 2023. And I determined that there are 142 DUE that were available in the growth target, but were not utilized. 131 went poof, and 11 were voided because that project went away. Some of the allocation that went poof in the growth center was, I believe, Cottonwood Crossing, where their allocation expired and they had come back to get new allocation, even though their total unit count remained the same. This 142 DUE is more allocation than what the Glaser specific plan proposes. And as a point of analysis that the committee looked at was, even by creating an allocation schedule for Glaser that's separate from the growth target, it's still less than what's been unutilized and can be viewed as, recapturing that growth target that recently eclipsed. Also included is some build out, both what's been experienced from 2013 to 2022 and what's projected into the future. Primarily that most of the new homes are within the growth center and very few homes in the agro part of town. This area in the middle, in the yellow, has medium growth. We predict about 200 new homes by 2030, and we counted 124 new homes from 2013 to 2022. Any questions there before I move on to?
Yeah, you're throwing a lot of numbers, so you have to slow down for me.
Yeah, there's a lot of numbers.
The 142 homes were in the growth center or outside the growth center, but in the residential area?
Throughout town.
Throughout
Yeah.
the whole town. Okay.
So there were 103 in the growth center, 13 in the sewer service area outside the growth center, and 26 outside sewer service in that green area on the map.
Okay. And then what was the 200 number you just threw at me a second ago?
The 200 number is the number of new homes we predict by 2030 in the yellow area on the map. The map says 124 because that's how many we counted from 2013 to 2022.
Okay. Yeah. So does that include the Glacier property?
Yes, that does.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it'd be Glacier, Martell, Summerfield.
Yeah, and I think that even included Trinity before they fell off. So realistically, it might be less than 200.
Yeah, but there are still some of those other red ones will get developed, right? I think the McCulloughs are going for.
Yep, the McCullough submitted an application. So some of those lots are eligible.
One lot's got a great big sign on it. It says 15 units, fully permitted.
Yeah, at the end of Mountain View.
Yep, that's the me showed one right by the McCulloughs.
Yep.
So next I have a comparison of conventional subdivision versus specific plan. And I also want to remind you in the part 1 memo from November 7th on page 6, I compare the projected build outs for this property. So the Glaser specific plan layout must comply with all dimensional and design standards of the bylaw, including density, setbacks, road utilities, landscaping, outdoor lighting. The only substantive bylaw amendment is that they meet that 50-point growth management score and have their own allocation schedule. And a landowner may pursue permits for different development proposals at the same time. That comparison chart shows DP 2406. So this is a project that had concept review with the DRB last week. It includes that Glaser specific plan, but it also proposes other development potentials with 130 or 180 units. So the landowner has a right to pursue multiple options. And their options narrow as they invest time and effort in going through permitting processes and beginning construction. I provide 2 tables that compare the impact of specific plan and conventional subdivisions on working landscape. So these are concepts that the advisory committee and the conservation commission were discussing when thinking about the proposed substantial benefit. Currently, that land, and I'm on table number 1, Windswept Farm is using the land. So they hay the fields, they have pasture for their horses. Specific plan creates more certainty for them. Whereas conventional subdivision, there would be less certainty. They would be seeking a lease agreement with a private HOA. Some of those larger unit development potentials might cut back on some of the pasture land that's available to them. And also other agricultural users. So if it's not Windswept Farm, if there's something different in the future, there's still more certainty because the town would be able to lease its agricultural land versus a private HOA might not be as generous. Table number 2 compares the key differences between specific plan and conventional subdivision. So it complies with density. They are providing some affordable units per growth management. They comply with the number of units on a dead-end road. And then they go above and beyond on open space requirements. So in the RZD, there's no quantitative minimum. They're providing over 50%. People should expect to have views of neighborhoods. In the RZD, they're proposing 15 acres of viewshed under public ownership. Protecting farmland is not a goal in the RZD, and it's a mean. The specific plan is a means for Windswept to remain viable or another ag use to remain operable. And lastly, ownership type. The bylaw through growth management incentivizes open space protection with a third-party easement. They're proposing the strongest level of protection by donating land to the town. Going over to that other memo from November 7th, page 6, where I compare the permitting timelines. That all those timelines begin in 2023 because that application, that concept level review has been through the DRB. For the most part, I project construction to begin around 2026. And that's talking with the engineer about the time it takes to get through their state permits, get construction, materials and equipment and staff all lined up. At the end of the day, I project that, by middle of the 2030s to closer to 2040, we're seeing complete build out. That whether it's specific plan or whether it's another development proposal, this land will be built out. I'll pause there for any questions.
So this goes to my question about, is this, what was it, 18 on top of 20 or within, or is there some overlap of that, right? Because this would be adding 18 on top of the 20, right? So
Correct.
the question is, would you really use all the 20 is what you seem to be questioning here. Because if they went the traditional way, which is 130 units on that table, is that what this is meant to be? Or is it just, I'm sorry, on the table on page 6, the page 6 table with the different unit counts, does this all assume, it sounds like they're starting the same time whether they go with the specific plan or not.
Right, yeah. So because they submitted that application to the DRB for all 3 concepts, specific plan, and then 2 other development proposals, the motion is set for this land to be developed in some fashion.
But would they be they wouldn't start construction sooner, I mean, at the same time schedule, would they?
Probably not. I think because even if the specific plan gets approved, they'll have to go through the Development Review Board for discretionary permit. They'll have to go through state permitting as well. What the build out projected was intended to show is specific plan or not, this land will probably be fully developed in some fashion before 2040. Your other question about that 18 dwelling units a year, yes, that is separate and in addition to that 20 units a year. But when you look at that past build out of growth management, we didn't even meet that growth target of 80 dwelling units a year. So on the net, it's not adding more than what the town was anticipating because we actually received less within the recent past.
So given the development, and I know I'm putting you on the spot, it's just that honestly, the most question I get asked a lot is about, aren't we just accelerating development? And I feel like I don't know the answer to that question because because they're sort of next in line of, as far as processes are going, if the specific plan was not approved, they would, let's say that they choose to go with the 130 unit plan. 2 years later, I mean, wouldn't be 10 years later that they would get an allocation under growth management, right? Might be a couple.
It would be a grind, but they would get through it. And at the end of the day, and by 2040, there'll be more units. When the advisory committee was grappling with that question around, isn't this just accelerating growth? The key thing that they're not proposing is they're not requesting a change to the density rules. The density is 3 dwelling unit equivalents per acre, and they're below that. So our Williston's growth management rules aside, they're not changing anything about density. They'll actually be coming in below the maximum allowed densities.
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, that's one of the huge benefits, along with making the Moss Farm viable and keeping the houses from being built right up against Mountain View Road. Those are all really important things to me. The thing I'm struggling with is, what am I giving up for that? And what I don't think that I'm giving up in order to get all those great things that I would like to have for the town is accelerating growth. And I'm having trouble struggling with what's the most likely scenario, when would they start construction under growth management?
Right. I think specific plan or growth management track or our new inclusionary track, we'd probably see construction beginning around the same time, in that 2026 range. A benefit or something unique about the specific plan proposal is they're limited to the number of administrative permits per fiscal year. The way our growth management system is currently set up is you receive your allocation, you receive your first round of allocation before you've gone through discretionary permit and gone through your state permitting. And that's like the exponential curve, the hardest part of all your permitting. And that's why we do see some of those projects get abandoned. So my magic ball of saying a project that has allocation, when is the foundation going to be in the ground and when is that unit going to be occupied, is much cloudier for the growth management track than Glaser specific plan. Once they've pulled that administrative permit, I can see more clearly that within a year they'll be under construction, and within 1 to 2 years that home will be occupied. So the Glaser specific plan route is much more predictable for town services, knowing when units are going to be coming online, than that traditional growth management track where they have their whole range of allocation on this table, but when those units actually construct really fluctuates for reasons beyond the town control, with the construction market, housing market, economy, all of those things.
I would see that I am not an expert in this anyway means, but if I was trying to build 130 units, it would be nice to know I'm approved for 109 units. Now go make your units 18 at a time, as opposed to, well, I got 9 this year and I got 7 the next year and I got 15 the next year. As soon as I get 45, I'll start construction. Right? So I can see that being a benefit. I also just think at 20 a year, if most of the big developments are pretty well allocated, Summerfield is allocated, well, pretty close, right?
Yeah, I think did I say in here Summerfield is, or maybe that's the other growth report I'm working on for you guys. I think Summerfield's like 80% allocated. I think this upcoming growth management year in 2024 will be their last time. I think they need like 24, 25 units, and then Summerfield will have all of its allocation. This McCullough project's going to come on. It's going to need a couple. And then, the other question marks in this part of town, does Trinity try to revive something on their property? Does Martell revive that 1990s Coyote Run concept approval? There could be a lull for a moment, but it's really hard to predict.
But it just feels to me, just with the numbers and timing and everything, that I'm not accelerating 100 units by 5 years. I might be I'm certainly not accelerating it by 10 years. I might be accelerating it by 3 to 5. Without better information, I just kind of have to sit with that, so. So if you have an epiphany between now and whenever we have to make a decision, you know, that's a reasonable thing for me to have in my head, that would be helpful to me.
So,
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Did you have a comment?
Could I make a comment, please?
come up to the microphone.
Can you just briefly?
Yes. So, for the record, Ken Bellabo, I've been working with the Glazers on the application. You know, your question's a good one, Gene. And what I would say from where I sit, to amplify one of the things that Emily said is, what does the developer get out of it? They get a lot more certainty. The going through growth management is you're rolling the dice. I mean, the amount of allocation that could be available, because it only happens once a year, once each calendar year in March. What's going to be available this year? What will be available 2 years from now, 3 years from now? I don't know. The crystal ball just is not that clear. So clearly from an applicant perspective, there is a lot more certainty. Would it accelerate the build out of the project? I don't know that it would accelerate the end of the project, but it would probably give it some momentum early on. I think it's reasonable to say that, and I think that's where your question is going to. Related to the aspect of certainty, though, and again, one of the points that Emily was making is you're going to know what you're going to get. You're going to know how there was some concern in the meetings about the amount of development in this area. So we're taking some units off the table. So there will be fewer units if, for somebody that's concerned about what might take place here. And all of the benefits, I'm not going to recite them all, you know what they are, that come along for the ride. But if it goes through the traditional growth management process, there would be more development in the view shed. There would, things would be different. Exactly how it would work out, I couldn't tell you exactly today, but it would be different. So there is more certainty. I think there's more certainty for the town with this process. There's more certainty for the neighborhood. And yes, there is more certainty for the applicant. Otherwise, why would an applicant want to go through this unless there was going to be some benefit that they would also receive? So anyway,
They're just like hanging out with town, every night for the whole year with town committees and select boards.
it has been an adventure.
Thanks, Ken.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Yeah, a brief aside, if you told me years ago that I'd be working on a group project with my former boss, I would not have believed you. I think the complexity and uniqueness of Williston's growth management system, having someone who administered it for many years, we're trying to walk a citizen advisory committee through this process, and both of us being able to understand it and explain it differently has been an asset to the process, and bringing volunteer boards along with our complex bylaws sometimes.
Can I ask you a really simple question before you get back on a roll?
Yeah.
I was struck by the $35,000 for the 35 acres or whatever. Is that, is there no building lot on that whole, even the pasture land is not a buildable lot? I would think a building lot in the village, practically in the village, would be worth more than 35,000, even if it came with 30.
Right, so
Acres
that
of
number
wetlands.
came from the appraisal, that 38 acres, roughly $35,000. So that appraisal number is low because of the potential for wetlands. So a lot of that land is pasture and is currently used as pasture. If that goes away, the geologic characteristics of that land would probably trend back towards wetland. And then a vast majority of it is that forested. I think about 25 acres is forested. And a lot of that forest is not used agriculturally and presumed to be wetland as well.
Because if, I guess where I was going is if the Moss Farm couldn't continue, wasn't viable because we lost the pasture land and the grazing land, I assumed that could be redeveloped, that property, if they chose to sell out, and I didn't know if the pasture land would also. It was just, I was surprised that it was a little bit more valuable. You know, well, this is a. Yeah, come on up, Jack. Here's a $250,000 lot, but you've got to take the 30 acres of wetlands with it, so.
So the value of the land as done by the assessor indicated that there was a significant amount of wetland. When we were having the wetlands delineated, we didn't really want to push that part of the land that probably could have some additional houses. I didn't want to take away any additional land from the Moss's possible agricultural, operation. But most likely there are other properties if the land was going to be developed by someone else, they would probably do a much more accurate assessment of the wetlands, and likely there would be additional buildable lots, which would drive the cost like by multiples higher.
Yeah, thank you. I like the working landscape. I'm not a horse person, but I love going by the farm, and I think it's got value for that. But I would hate to see it build out to be another subdivision.
So what about if in place of calling it potential wetland, is there any way that could be part of the town's conserved land? Call that conserved land, that it can never be developed upon, no matter what?
Yeah.
Can we do that?
Yeah, and I'm going to jump ahead on my memo to middle way on page 5. We can talk about the plus or minus in a moment. So even under town ownership, the open space land will forever be a creature of specific plan. Therefore, any use or activity of the land must forever uphold the substantial benefits of viewshed, working landscapes, and conservation areas. So that agricultural land, working landscapes, I don't think the town would be able to, and the viewshed as well, do anything that's counter to those goals. So further subdivide it, put more houses on it, or commercial use, any use of that land that's counter to the substantial benefit would be, not permissible, because this land came out of substantial benefit, came out of specific plan. Those wetland constraints, we don't know the full extent of them in the pasture land. It's probably going to be pasture land, medium and long term. That viewshed land is fully delineated, and we know it's highly developable. And so in my staff report here, I wrote that, the town could not sell that for subdivision or develop it for something like a community center. In my original presentation on the 7th, I talked about what the town plan defines open space as, and it talks about working landscapes and country parks and outdoor developed parks, but it doesn't talk about those like indoor recreation uses or commercial uses. But yeah, I think that's a fair thought.
Thank you.
Yeah, so jumping up to the top of page 5, plus or minus in the boundary adjustment. So the proposed town plan and bylaw amendments and all accompanying documents refer to units and acres with plus or minus. This is very intentional because specific plan is concept sketch level of design, and that detailed engineering, including updated survey boundary with exact acreage, is not required until discretionary permit. So it wouldn't be until town plan and bylaw amendments are approved and they file a discretionary permit application when we would know the exact acreages of things, as well as the exact unit count. Plus or minus acknowledges that some elements of the subdivision may change to comply with the bylaws or public works specifications, which are road and water and sewer design. Plus or minus also means the amount of donated land may change, and it's expected to decrease a couple of acres from 53 to 49 or 50 acres. There is a man-made pond adjacent to 195 Windridge Road. This was built about 10 years ago. And through the advisory committee process, it was determined that the town should not own this pond because it's a liability and maintenance responsibility. the advisory committee and the applicant, we drew that rectangle, that black rectangle around it. It's about 1.5 acres. Might not be the best property line arrangement. That red line just depicts something that's slightly larger, 4.8 to 5.5 acres. This land would still essentially be open space, but it would be boundary line adjustment to the property owner next door, and it would not be donated to the town. On the map, it says Glaser. It used to be Jack's house. It's now owned by the McElroys. So it's possible that if you choose to warn things for a public hearing, that town plan and bylaw language might reflect that adjustment to get the pond off of the town land and create a more user-friendly boundary between town and private land. Lastly, the specific plan approval would be the select board adopting town plan and bylaw amendments. Then it would go through the development review board as well as any necessary state permits. The town may participate with the applicant through the Act 250 process. And then during that permitting process, legal counsel would assist the town manager and Jack, the property owner, with the necessary steps and documents to transfer the land and town ownership. For example, in conventional development review, it's not uncommon for a developer to have a purchase and sale agreement. I'll buy this land for you once all the permits are in place. And the town council may want a similar mechanism that spells out at what level of permitting and platting review does that land become transferred to the town. The bylaw amendment references an irrevocable offer as part of discretionary permit, but these might be some other mechanisms because a land transfer to the town is intended here. With that, I think that concludes everything I had for you this evening.
Questions? More additional questions?
For the record, the Jensen property owned here is not me. Thank you, Emily. That was a good job.
Thank you.
So there are additional people in the room. Does anybody else have questions for Emily or comments, sir?
I wonder if I could make a comment.
Sure, when you come up to the microphone, if you could.
You want me to stay here or?
Do whatever you want to do.
Okay. What?
Good, how are you, Mike?
My name is Mike Moss. My wife Tina and I are the owners and operators of Windswept Farm. I have attended the majority of the meetings regarding this Glaser parcel and have found the specific plan procedure to be a well-designed and arduous route which affords the community a process and a route which allows the supplement to the existing regulations without supplanting them. As the proposal has worked its way through the various committees, each of those bodies saw fit to vote in the positive regarding this parcel. It is now up to you, the members of the Select Board, to render the final decision and hopefully to follow in the footsteps of your predecessors. Windswept Farm has been in operation for over 50 years, and we hope to remain in business benefiting the children of Williston. We have been both humbled and gratified to see the number of people, students and parents, who have either written letters or participated in person and expressed their support for the farm and their appreciation of the time that they've spent with us. If the Glaser proposal is approved, we will continue to provide programs which benefit the young people of Williston. Unfortunately, the two other proposals before you would probably put Windswept out of business. In conclusion, I would also like to touch upon the question of aesthetics. The Glazer's vision, as embodied in the specific plan, leaves a large proportion of the property untouched and important views intact. I think this is crucial. We in Vermont need to be careful to preserve that which makes our state so special. If the parcel is developed by a major player whose goal is maximizing profit, Vermont could look like New Jersey, with a multitude of poorly sited houses which sacrifice that which makes our state so special. The Glazers are proposing to donate a large portion of the parcel, in excess of $1 million, to the town to bring their vision of the land to fruition. I urge this board to accept this gift, which will benefit all of us as residents of Williston. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Are there any other questions or comments from people viewing? Anybody signaling online?
No, just staff as one.
Okay.
And Greta is still on.
And Greg.
So the next step is up to us. The next step that we could take legally is, well, a bunch of things. We could do nothing. That is a viable, legally viable option. We could also warn a public hearing, get feedback from more people in town. If the plan is to go forward, we would have to warn a public hearing next. Obviously, we can't vote on something like this without having a public hearing and going through the proper procedures. Is there any discussion or thought about those options or what we should do?
Well, staff has put in an extraordinary amount of time on this, as well as all of the committees in town. So I think, and if we have a public hearing, there'll be lots of comments, I hope, on both sides of the issue, which I think we need to hear. So I would, at this point, I'd move to warn a public hearing to receive feedback on the proposed amendments to the Unified Development Bylaw and Comprehensive Plan as presented in the transmitted specific plan proposal for the Glaser property from the Planning Commission.
Is there a second?
A second.
Discussion on the motion?
I think I feel similarly to Terry. I think we've tasked a couple of different groups now to look at it very carefully, and they spent a lot of time, and the plan has changed quite a bit. I think it will be interesting to hear new comments now that the plan is more solidified, to see if there are other things we haven't thought of, or that two major committees have not thought of with their own public comments. But yeah, I think, out of at least, if nothing more, out of respect for those committees, I would like to move it to a public comment.
Any other discussion?
I agree. I think staff is well prepared now.
Hearing no other discussion, we'll call the vote. All those in favor of the motion to warn a public hearing, say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Eric will get that scheduled and
Yep, we'll coordinate. It'll likely be probably in the January timeframe. I'll have to chat with the board on the schedule here with the holidays coming. I'll keep everyone posted.
Emily, thank you.
Thank you, guys. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, definitely after the holidays, people need
Happy
to,
Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
wrap their heads around this again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next on the agenda, 2024 health insurance plan renewal.
Something completely different.
Yeah.
So every year, the select board passes by motion the health plan that staff that we'll offer to our staff members for the next calendar plan year. In 2023, we made a switch of our carrier from Blue Cross Blue Shield from MVP We saved some money doing that. We've worked with our broker to analyze our current plan, the gold plan of Blue Cross Blue Shield. We're recommending a change to the silver level plan. It's the same network, same coverage for staff. But what we find with this plan is the premium is 20% lower. We were looking at a 12% premium increase with our current plan if we stayed with it, in excess of $200,000 for next year in the budget. So this would, we think it would yield us about $120,000 savings there, which is potentially helpful as we're been trying to balance the budget the last couple of days, and it's coming in higher than we want it to. So the way this would work is our health plans are set up. We do a cost share based on union contract and for non-represented staff. And then for towards the deductible, we do towards the, we call it first dollar. So first, currently we do the first 84% in a health reimbursement arrangement or an HRA that we give to employees. If they exceed that amount and they need more care, they pick up the last 16%. So what we're proposing to do is to shift that share because the deductible is going up a bit next year to the town would pay the first 89% and the employee would pick up the last 11%. The town's going to save money on the premium. The employee is going to save money on the premium up front. As we looked at the numbers, at the end of the day, if the employee needs to meet their full deductible, they may need to pay an extra $50 to $100, and we felt that was fair in looking at this. So our recommendation for the board is consider a shift in our plan to the silver plan for next year, and that would be how it would all line up here. And we have to do our open enrollment here in the next couple of weeks, so we typically bring us to the board in November as we work through the budget and prepare for that other fun process that we do every year. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions for Eric?
Just a point of clarification, because I'm hearing it over Zoom, obviously, too. You said 50 to 100, not 50 to 100, right?
Correct. Yes. Yes. Important detail. Yes. Yeah, that's our estimate here. What we tried to do with increasing the HRA share was to recognize that staff is going to save a little bit on the premium. But one thing we're able to have been offered as a public sector organization is robust health care. We don't want to lose that, but at the same time, we recognize that the cost is increasing year by year. So there has to be some type of move forward that the employees pick up a little bit. And I think this is fair to ask them to pick it up on the back end. They'll save some money on the front end. We do pre-tax, some flexible spending as well. So employees could sock that away if they know they're likely going to exceed their deductible. They could sock it away pre-tax, save a little money, then they'd have it there at the end of the day.
Do you have any feedback from, have you run this by anybody on staff? Are they?
Nope. I've just with Shirley and our broker, and we would plan to roll it out in the next couple of days. And I'd alert the unions. Our contracts allow us to substitute a comparable plan.
Further questions?
Just as a callback to our previous discussion, would this potentially be another role that an HR director or another process that an HR director would participate in, like plan renewal, plan consideration, or?
Yep, that would likely be something I'd task them to do as well. We have a great broker, Sally Hickok and Boardman. She's great, but it's kind of facilitating that relationship, running the open enrollment and just overseeing all aspects. Questions on the health plan, I know I surely can attest, we get staff questions. We really try to refer them to Blue Cross Blue Shield, but a lot of, it's nice to have someone at least to talk to if there's an issue. So I know surely, especially when we switch carriers, we'll get an influx of questions. So we like to try to limit changing carriers unless there's a really compelling reason to do so, and not to do that any more frequently than every 4 or 5 years if we can help it.
If there are no further questions, there is a proposed motion.
I move to approve the Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Vermont Select Silver CDHP reflective plan as the 2024 health insurance plan to offer employees.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Greta, I think we talked over you. Did you say aye or nay?
I said aye.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. Okay, manager report.
I'll touch on a couple brief things here. So we are wrapping up the budget proposal. So we will have that ready. Our goal is next Tuesday. Typically what we'll do is it will be in a PDF version and a binder version. Big change this year, we're going to do one binder instead of a capital binder and operating binder. If anyone on the board would prefer not to have a binder, just let me know. It's one less set we have to print, but we're happy to make binders for everyone. So we will have those out next Tuesday. That'll be in preparation for your meeting on the 5th. The meeting on the 5th is really just a general overview. I typically provide just a walkthrough through the transmittal I'll provide in the front of your packet, kind of some of the key issues and themes. And then on the 9th will be our review by the departments, going through that on that Saturday session. And then we have a public hearing. We always hold the first meeting in January. That'll be January the 2nd to receive initial public comment on the budget. And then the next 2 to 3 meetings, 4th if we need it in January, in the warning window will be for the board to finalize the budget that will go on the warning. We have to post the warning 30 to 40 days before town meeting. So we typically, the board will work to wrap that up the 3rd week or so in January, but as much time as the board needs. Yeah, that'll be the process before you here. And as we discussed, the board won't meet after the 9th until January to have a break. Try to move more of all that budget review to one day to see how. Try that.
So I've got 3 weeks to study the budget.
So I think I previous to the board, we're continuing to see a lot of increase on the expense side. It's wages and benefits. It's the bottom line is going to come in higher. And I'll be doing something a little bit different this year. I'm going to present it as a budget that shows current level of services we provide, and then we'll break out to other categories with other potential positions and service enhancements that the board for the board's discussion. Just where we're landing on the expense side of the budget, I just don't want to bake any additional service enhancements proposals into a bottom line that's higher that I wanted to see, but wages and benefits are driving a lot of that you'll see as we wrap up the numbers here the next couple of days. So just to like transmittal will outline that and kind of the key things on the revenue side always comes down to taxes, fund balance. Those are the big two: local option tax projections, potential use of ARPA towards the capital budget. So that will be coming up here. So that's always it's a big process. So
Is there somewhere in that process that we see the FY23 final numbers?
Yep, Shirley's got the draft. You just about have those wrapped up, Shirley, the 23.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, doesn't have to be perfect.
We have the draft numbers in the transmittal. The auditors are here the week after next, so our goal is to have we'd like to have the audit done if we can before the budget process wraps up. But
Before, yeah, oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Where you see there's a budget summary in there.
Yeah.
So you'll see 21, 22, 21, 22 actuals.
Pre-audit.
Whole draft.
Draft, okay.
I probably have a couple more countries to book. I'm waiting for something from Essex for water sewer, but not general. So probably have a couple general fund entries to post and things I just haven't had a chance to get to yet.
Yeah.
yeah, we try to do that 3-year look back.
Yeah. And then, did you mention in there, I don't know, I'm so foggy today, so, about the ARPA
Oh, right.
decision making?
Yeah, so my plan is for your next meeting as well as a follow-up to your retreat to transmit that, adding the extra columns as kind of a worksheet to try to do some draft allocation work for the board over that break when you come back in January, because this will dovetail into ARPA decision making in the capital budget as well, with a few items that we've mentioned, along with how you want to allocate that remaining $2 million. I've tasked Public Works with following up on your questions from the retreat. So Bruce is working on a priority summary memo, and I asked him to kind of do a report card on our infrastructure overall to give a board a report on that, and kind of thinking about the value added in moving an infrastructure project up versus waiting for it in the queue. So I asked them to look at that and also look at our sidewalk and path network. I know that was some recommendations from your policy advisory boards and committees, and Public Works has recommendations for gaps that are existing where they would prioritize some of that work to go. So
Great.
I've asked him, I think he'll hopefully have that done, so I can transmit that to you on the 5th as well. If not, we should get that to you on the 9th, and I'll likely, if there's time for Bruce to touch on that on the Saturday session, he could chat about that too. Then I just wanted to share, we've hired another certified police officer, Armin Hamabasic, who was sworn in last week. He'll be doing some just field work with our staff here, and he started shift over the weekend, so it was great. It was good to have him aboard. And we have another new officer, Sabrina Dubois, who is all cleared and ready to go for the February Police Academy. So she'll be enrolling in that. So it's like 2 open positions, and hopefully we'll get these filled. So we're moving in a good direction there. I'll stop there. I think that's all we have here. And just 2 quick liquor license things for other businesses. Everything I have tonight.
Okay, well, let's get to other business then.
Okay. So the board might recall when there's a new business in town with a liquor license, it's not renewed on the cycle of April 30th. So Railroad in Maine was a new restaurant in town last year that came to town December. So their liquor license is up for renewal. So the town clerk forwarded that to me. It's a 2nd and 3rd class license and outdoor consumption permit. It was approved last November. Restaurant opened in December. We haven't had any issues or reports with their service there. So the question would be for the board to consider approving a 1st and 3rd class liquor license and outdoor consumption permit for Railroad in Maine through November 21st, 2024.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Then the second, and I don't know if the board, this is a new one for me. So the board, so we have a business that's changing its location. It's this Unboxed Enterprises on Boyo Circle. They do kind of mail order wine and I believe there too. They have a small retail operation there as well. They are moving locations within the building. So the state DLC says they need a new liquor license approval. I just bring it to the board's attention if you want to consider a motion for that, or I feel they've been approved, so we could handle this administratively as well. But as the liquor control board, I'll leave that to your discretion.
So do we have to make a motion for the liquor control board to be able to approve it?
Sarah will hit approve in the portal on the town's end, and that's what we need to do. The question is, do you want to make a motion for her to do that, or just direct me to tell her?
Well, you know what,
Handle
my
it
only thought,
administratively.
and this is like really off the top of my head, is that if we said, well, we don't care, it's within the building, but they were moving from a 2nd floor back space to a front window space in the same building, I think we might care. So I don't know why we wouldn't just approve it if we, rather than say we don't care if it's in a building. Is that what you're asking? You're just not sure?
Just not, it hasn't come up for me before.
Yeah.
So if you want to take action here, I think, I think it's just moving down a little bit. It's a warehousing space off Boyer Circle.
Yeah, and in this case, it probably doesn't matter at all, but if we started saying, well, we don't do it within a building, and then someday it may matter if they're going some more
Sure.
interesting places that are being built, now.
Yeah, but sure. We don't have to be consistent or logical as we go forward.
Yes, we do.
No, we
Yes,
don't.
we do.
So the motion, if you want to consider it, is to approve a change in location for Unboxed Enterprises LLC for a 2nd class license.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Further discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay. Final thoughts on agenda items from tonight's meeting. Are there any?
I mean, I guess only for me to be a public hearing, people get back from the holidays. I don't want anybody in town to think that we snuck it in when they weren't paying attention. So if we could just do it like later in January, so people have time to have seen it and respond to it and get it on their calendars or whatever.
Yeah, the typically, the board's regular meeting dates are the 2nd and the 16th. Then we use the 9th most likely as a budget workshop, and then the 23rd as a potential extra meeting. So if the board were to have it in January, the 16th would probably be the potential date for that.
That sounds.
If not, February 6th would be the next
I mean, the
potential.
planning commission opened their public hearing, had 2 people at it. So I think,
Yeah. It's
which
not
means we
unheard
probably
of
have
here.
50.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do we have concerns with getting them the town report? The town report, budget if we wait later in January?
talking about the Glaser one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. That's okay. So I'll aim for January 16th then for scheduling that.
Great. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
My thing is really the HR director position. Obviously, as we're considering the budget, and I know you just said, that we have this budget expense and that, this budget increase. I'm not sure if you factored in the possibility of adding an HR director position as one of those extra expenditures or not, but I do think it's something we should take up sooner rather than later, because as we're thinking over, long-term planning for the town of things like potentially adding additional police officers or whatnot, it becomes more and more apparent, the need for this position. And so I think we should take it up, as soon as possible for discussion.
Yeah, but Greta, I built it in as a potential budget enhancement. I've included that in a couple police positions and elevating a buildings and grounds position that's currently part-time to full-time. That's my short list for.
Sounds like we'll be addressing this again during budget season, so.
Can I add a final thought?
Sure.
So just in regards to the HR position, I'll just tell you one of my other concerns that's been a concern since I arrived at the town. We are very short-staffed, and currently right now, Lynn is extremely sick here doing payroll because I don't have the time or the capacity. I haven't even learned how to be a payroll backup for Lynn. So with additional help, some of my functions now, of course, will move to HR. With the addition of the part-time permanent person downstairs, Mary will be able to help me more. Maggie, our part-time person, is actually a backup, is training to be a backup for Lynn for AP as well. So with the addition of both these positions, we will actually have backup for two very important functions in the town that we don't right now. So just wanted to add
Thank you.
my little sales pitch.
So if there's nothing else, I will declare us adjourned. Thank you and have a.